Welcome to Linda's Corner. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about returning to a place of faith. I'm delighted to welcome special guest Joe Rockey. Joe created a successful real estate career. He is a champion axe thrower, and he is also the co-host of the podcast Father and Joe. You can listen to Joe's podcast at his website, and I'll include a link in the show notes. Welcome, Joe. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
Well, thank you for having me. Yes.
I am excited for this conversation, and you are a bit of an enigma, kind of a mystery to me. Here you are, you studied business and accounting and real estate investing and all the ways to be able to make money. And then you're a champion axe thrower, which seems to be very un-accountant-like behavior, if I may say. And then in addition to that, you have this whole other side thing going on that doesn't make any money. And that is a podcast to help people be able to return to their faith. And so it's kind of, you are complex. You can't really stick you in a box and throw axes at you. So can you tell me who you are and why you do what you do?
Yeah, so a lot. So the axe throwing actually kind of flows in with the faith element here, because where it really started was a thing that my wife and I could do together, because the axe throwing of its very nature is not a strength thing. Some people just instinctually think you got to throw it really hard to get it stuck in a tree, and it's really not. I mean, the thing only weighs 3 pounds. So it's really more about finesse and technique. And I knew eventually she was going to get better than me because she listens better than me. And that's basically is what's happening now. So before COVID, yeah, I was really good at it. I certainly lost a lot of the technique of it because I just wasn't doing it every day like I had been before. And a lot of people did stick with it. So I have been lapsed since then. But at one point, yeah, it was good. But the essence of it, of having something to do where you're seeing a group of people, people I never would have met otherwise in life, and having something fun to look forward to. I personally love it that our league's on Thursday night. To me, it's the best night to do it because no one really does anything on Fridays anyway. So, you get something to look forward to and almost start your weekend a little early. As far as the businesses and all that, I created those because I wanted to have essentially residual income. I wanted to get paid for work I did younger in my life when I'm older in life, because at the end of the day, that's really what retirement is. It's having enough stream of money. It's not necessarily a big pile of money. A pile of money can become a stream of money, but it's the stream of money is you're ultimately going to get to anyway. So why not start that now? So that's essentially was the mindset when I started the real estate entities back in 2011. And, since then they've been growing and doing their own thing, and certainly have had a lot of experiences, good and bad, in that arena. And ultimately, what led me to talk with you here today was the conversation we want to have about faith, and the Father and Joe podcast is kind of what started that here. And we started that in 2017. And for those people who don't remember a life before COVID, 2017, everyone hated everyone because there was an orange man in charge. Paraphrasing life, that was what we were doing here. Whether it was a real reason or not, reasons were created to create division within society, essentially. And they were getting perpetuated by, regardless of which news channel you watched, it was everywhere, and it was, Facebook, Twitter, whatever. It's all designed to do that. And I understand why Facebook and Twitter have done that, is because they're created by algorithms, which the more attention goes to the crazier stuff. I do not understand why adults talking to a camera perpetuated it. But nonetheless, we started that. We started everything here in the podcast 2017. We have just released episode 278 or something like that, or recorded it, maybe not released it yet. They release once a week on Tuesdays, and really it's the goal of it is to look at practical applications of what faith really is in real life. So obviously there's a lot of conversation about relationship and prayers, and just some X's and O's about this is wrong and this is right. He is a Catholic priest. I mean, he's been trained in all this stuff way more than I ever could. So there is that comes into play. But then there's also real world stuff that comes into play. It's really kind of designed to calm and get you thinking about what is important when we really look at what's guiding our lives. And we hopefully give people a chance to just slow down and think, where are we during the 20, 25 minutes or so, whatever each episode is.
That is great. So I'm trying to decide, should we keep going with the podcast thing, or do I had a question that I'm probably going to forget if I don't go back? So we'll see.
Shoot it now. Let's see where we're at.
Okay. So when you talked about, so the axe throwing started and part of the faith and a connection with being able to do something fun with your wife. And so I haven't yet put all those pieces together of how those things fit as part of the story. So it's like, to me, it's a little chapter that has, and then we went on, and I didn't figure out all of this part yet. So
fair enough. Well, at the end of the day, the marriage is like the most important thing I have going, right? The rest of everything would fall apart without it. I mean, that's really the glue of life. It's just the way it is. I recognize I'm not good at everything, and she's good at the vast majority of things I'm not, and vice versa. And that's why it works. One of the things that I believe that I think that makes me different from the majority of society is that my relationship with my wife is more important than my relationship with my son. Because if there's no us together as a marriage, his life effectively is ruined. So I treat it like that every day. And while one person can be a good relationship with someone else, most people need a network of relationships in their life. And seeing people on a regular basis through something such as axe throwing or whatever have you is a way to do that. So that's hopefully that kind of connected the chapters and made it a little bit more.
Okay, so I'm getting a little closer. So I can see that your relationship is very important, particularly with your wife, which I absolutely love. And I think that really is the foundation. And that is what makes, when you're talking about raising children, we should love our spouse more than we love our children, if you're going to do some sort of hierarchy, because that relationship is the foundation on which those children were created in the first place. So I'm with you, and I think that that's a really cool and fun activity that you have found something that you enjoy to do together. So, but you also said that that was part of the faith thing. And so how does that connect your relationship and the axe throwing? Because this is a really fun kind of segue, and your faith.
Well, I mean, really, it's that's one of the things that Father has probably taught me for the 5 years continuously throughout it, is that living our faith is relational. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the more positive relations you have, the more you're living your faith. Paraphrasing 5 years of him teaching me stuff into one sentence, that's probably the direction he would want to take it, is that the practical application of your faith is through other relationships. And, you can kind of see people trying to mimic that in other areas of life, particularly like in sales and management, teaching things where they're like, you want to, be able to relatable and good with your employees and all that stuff. But in reality, what it is it's living your faith, and trying to take the faith element out of it, I think, is doing people a disservice. There should be something greater that you're working for than just the check. And for most people, it is. Now, don't get me wrong, money is an important resource and it's certainly necessary. But if that's the end all be all, you end up really putting yourself in a unhappy long-term situation. And that's kind of where I was trying to get with, is that it's the relationships of everyone that really kind of brings you out into becoming a higher and more happy person.
Ooh, okay. I love that. So it is all about our relationships, your relationship with your spouse, your relationship with your child, and your relationship with God. And it seems that when we have our relationship with God in a good place, then that's really, we talked before about how a marriage is the foundation for a family creation, but our relationship with God is the foundation of who we are and why we're here. And it is the root really of everything. And I've talked to lots of different experts. I talked to this wonderful physician. She'd been practicing for 40 years. And she said, we have our physical health and our mental and our emotional, our spiritual. She says, and I have done the work. I've worked with everybody. And she said, and now that I've put my faith in a good place, I realize, you know what? When we have that one correct, a lot of the other things fall into place.
That's
and I
absolutely
think
correct.
that is really the magic, is if we can get this element correct, then everything else just works out. And so I love how you put it together. And I listened to one of your episodes, and it was about how you were at the hospital and you had an incident with your son and you weren't particularly happy with the way things
Yeah.
turned out. And then say, so this is a real experience that I'm going through, and how does my faith come into play? So would you mind just kind of giving a quick overview of kind of what happened and what your takeaway is of how we can use these real life experiences to be able to say, okay, how does that fit? Because to me, if we're talking about church is Sunday and then I've got the other 6 days of the week that have, and there's no interconnection, then it's like, well, then this doesn't matter, or something doesn't matter, right?
Yeah. Well, first off that point, it's hard to live compartmentalized. In fact, it's nearly impossible. And to give a very vivid example, that's how they try to build the Titanic to make it sink proof. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't work. Once one component got flooded all the way through, it eventually got to the next and the next. And same with problems in your life. You can't isolate one part of another. If you're horrible in one element, it's going to bleed into everything else, because essentially you have relationships with everyone else. You can't go online and be essentially venomous and toxic and don't think that doesn't spill over in your workplace or in other elements of your life. So that's just to go off your comment there. But to answer your question about what I was going through, obviously I only have one son, so this is the first time for all of this stuff is kind of the starting point. And Joey obviously gets born, so the whole birthing process was new to me. So this would have been the first follow-up thing that he did outside the hospital. So we now had a selected doctor. We had really no idea what we were looking for. We flat out just picked the one that was closest to us. Like, all right, we'll see what it is. I mean, because if it works, it's closer, it's better, right? So that was the thought. And we got there, and just immediately, it was one of these things where I just knew it was the wrong answer. Part of my life for the last 11 years is make judgments on, do I want to buy this house or not? And I make that choice essentially in 10 minutes while walking through the house. So I have this kind of already pre-wired into me for judging this. But nonetheless, we go through it. We're there. We kind of have to, at least let the doctor see them. But what they had was they hadn't updated their equipment. So for those who don't know, the baby, when he's that new, the temperature is essentially how they gauge any problem. If there's something wrong with him, it's going to be because the temperature is wrong. It's either way too low or way too high. So he's already super tired just by the virtue of the day, and we don't know how to put him on a schedule yet. He's 4 days old or whatever. So we take him there. He's already cranky. It's time for them to give the thermometer, and the only way they do it is they do it rectally. I think that's how you say that. Well, the long story short is the first time they did it, the thermometer was the broken one. It's the fact that they had a broken one is the thing. So he didn't like it. He freaks out even more. The second time she didn't get in there, right? And this whole time he's underneath an AC vent that is going and pumping out cold air on him. No. So combine all of this, he is not happy, freaking out, and ultimately puts up a score that's lower. We go from being told that our baby is 8 degrees lower and there's a good chance he's going to die. That's basically what the doctor said without saying it. I'm looking at him. I look at the situation for what it is, and I effectively know that this was just a botched situation. And I'm like, so we get forced to go to Children's Hospital. And at Children's, there are some legitimate children there that you can tell there's something wrong. Like, you look at them immediately and something's going on, and I wish that wouldn't happen to anyone. But there's a much larger percentage of people that are basically just there because it's free and they're hanging out. And that part was very frustrating, seeing this in practice. I've heard people complain about this for years, but actually seeing it in practice, was very shocking, because I don't go to the doctor. I don't know what any of this stuff is really like in reality. We're now in line to get to another doctor to basically judge whether we're worthy or not to be attended to, back to the main hospital wings. They're like a triage doctor there. And so now we got this panic, we got this worry, and, deep down, I feel that there's nothing wrong. And ultimately that ends up being the case, but you don't know that in the moment. You were just told that there's a major problem here, and all of my gut instinct can tell me it's not, but this is a medically trained person who has, or been around the block, so to speak. So she should know what she's talking about when she said there's a big problem here. So we get to the nurse. The nurse basically looks at him and said, "There's nothing wrong here, but because you're here, we now have to go through this process because it's a bureaucratic system. You're now signed up in it, and congratulations." So we sit into we sit back there for 2 to 3 hours. By that point, he was back to normal temperature. He had eaten twice. He was totally fine. There was nothing wrong with him. But the part that really got to me was how the bureaucratic system could suck you in and not let you out. That was just a core political thing that upset me. But more the core concept. I was taking someone's time and energy when I felt at the end of the day we didn't need it, and everything that was placed on us in that situation was essentially undue. And in my opinion, because the original place we went to knew they were getting paid regardless and didn't feel like upgrading their equipment. Paraphrasing the entire experience. So, obviously a tidal wave of emotion, and then the whole time they're trying to calm my wife. So there's a lot of heightened emotions, especially when you get told that your less than a week old baby might die, and you just delivered this baby. So there's obviously a giant amount of hormones I will never understand in that world, but they're real and it's a lot. So I know that much. And that was essentially what that experience was trying to keep everything calm. And I really do think that having the opportunity to have myself grounded, which really is, I think, a big offshoot of trying to live a faithful life, is you become grounded. That's part of what the virtue of temperance is not freaking out. But in that case, it would be not releasing anger on the world just because something bad happened to me. Okay. So that's a direct correlation in my mind that goes from something that we do that we're advised to for the faith being applied through the conduit of a grounded spiritual side of my being and not taking it out on other people. Because the other truth was, if I started flipping out on people, no one was going to want to come help us if we're not being recipients of that. So,
and that's there's so many unknowns, because like you said, this is a situation that you have never been in before. And so you're relying on the expertise and the experience of someone else. And then to feel so frustrated that the care wasn't what it should be, and that the expertise wasn't what it should be. And there's fear involved, and there's frustration, and there's anger, and all of these different things. And these are so normal to everyone. And the experience, whether the exact experience will be different for other people, but having those same feelings of being really let down and feeling not in control of the situation, that's really frustrating. And I thought it was interesting at the beginning when you first attended this new place that you said your gut, your instinct said, this is not a good fit for me. And it's interesting that in some areas of your life, you have developed that and that intuition that where in your business world, within 10 minutes, you recognize, yes, I'm going to invest in this property, or no, I'm not going to invest in this property because it feels right. And to be able to develop that feeling and to be able to trust that gut instinct, I think is a very valuable skill. And sometimes we learn when we didn't listen. And then we have the consequences that follow through. So from this experience, was there any other takeaways, anything else that you felt like, because of my faith, because of my understanding, my relationship with God, it helped me be able to navigate this situation a little better? Or maybe if I didn't do awesome, I can do better next time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think being there and kind of already knowing that it was going to be okay. Like, that was the other part of it is I didn't know how to describe it, but I knew everything was okay. Mm-hmm. Like, despite the fact all the rest of this was going on, I just knew, obviously I'm able to apply some logic to it. We were able to hold him now. He's not physically cold. If you were so cold you were sick, you'd be able to detect it. He wasn't happy, and he wasn't playing nice with the other doctors. So that's what happened. So there was this sense of yes, yeah, we knew it was going to work out. So it then kind of, once it settled, especially after he ate when we were in the waiting room, it just more settled into he's fine. We just now have to go through this bureaucracy, essentially. And a lot of opinions about why that was a waste. And then at that point, that's not about him anymore. It's about me getting my time wasted. Right. Which, unfortunately, it's not the first time that's ever happened. No. First time in this context.
And it won't be the last.
It won't, exactly. So, like, this is something I just have to go through. Just, it'll be over when it's over, and I can't control that. And I think that that's part of the faith structure that really comes into play. There's certainly much we can control. We can control everything that comes out of our mouths. We can control the amount of exercise and the things we eat. But there's really, the list doesn't get too much longer than that. You can control where you choose to live, but you can't control who your neighbors are, or will your neighbors stay the same way they are in the future. Every relationship you're in, at best, you can control half of it. You control what you bring to the table. You don't know how the other side will react forever. But that being said, there are certainly, you can tell who someone is by their patterns. And for better or worse, most people will never actively review their own patterns, which makes them, on one hand, wildly predictable. But on the other hand, that's how you can end up in the same spot over and over. So if your patterns are negative, it's very hard to change them, because you never look at yourself as negative, especially if you're externalizing all of your problems. So that's another part of the faith. I mean, we've discussed that at the end of the day, you're responsible for what you did. And, that's ultimately what you're judged upon. So it becomes very personal. You can't externalize and say, everything bad's happening to me. It's, okay, maybe you're caught in the middle of a hurricane, but what did you do to try to make your situation better for yourself and for your family? Mm-hmm. So that's an important element that gets called to it. And for most people, that will bring an element of shame. So they don't want to do it, because who really wants to deal with shame? But shame basically is the same as getting a D on a test. Do you want to accept that you're going to fail chemistry, or do you want to get better and study harder next time? And that's really what our biological system is you did something wrong and you're feeling it through this emotion that we call shame. And I think that that's something that we're trying to erase from society. And I think it's the completely wrong direction that is happening. But that might be a little bit of a digression.
So let me see if I can catch. I'm trying to catch the pieces, parts, as we're connecting to faith. I'm catching that we're not in control of everything, but we are in control of our reaction to things. That part we are in charge of. And you talked about accountability, and how coming from a place of faith and recognizing that there is a God, and you mentioned that we are judged, that helps us to become aware that we are accountable for our responses, for our actions, for our words, for our role, however big or small that may be, that we are playing. And also, you're talking about the idea that when we feel, and you use the word shame, and I can see that means the word. We have words that we all use, and sometimes one person uses a word and it means this, and we can use the exact same word and someone else means it to mean this. So I'm going to, for my brain, I'm going to change that to guilt. Brene Brown, she talked about, for her, the difference between guilt and shame is, guilt is I did something bad or I did something wrong. And her definition of shame is I am bad and I am wrong. So just for my brain, I'm going to use the word guilt, but I totally understand that you could use a different word and it would make perfect sense. But when we have those feelings that don't feel good and we recognize, okay, I didn't respond correctly. I didn't do things as I should. And then again, coming from that place of faith, you're saying, those feelings that are uncomfortable are actually trying to help you. They're trying to help you to make a change, to recognize that there's something that is not in harmony, that is not in line with what is good. And by we don't want to ignore those, and we don't want to pretend that they don't exist. And we don't want to try to erase those feelings and say, well, just don't feel them, because they serve a purpose. So am I close? Am I getting
You're
the
100%
elements?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's really those moments that if you look at how people get in trouble long term in their life, they're trying to run away or dissipate or hide those feelings or emotions they're funnel. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the majority of addiction, is trying to get away from those types of feelings.
Absolutely.
When you interview alcoholics, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So, part of it is to recognize that, yes, the correction you made there is that doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It means you made mistakes. Well, we all have and we all will. That's part of life. This is not condemning you for doing the wrong thing. This is looking back, what did we do? How do we get there? So that when we get to the situation again, because yes, there are once in a lifetime moments. You're never having another senior prom as a senior. That's part of life. But the concept of being with each other in a social gathering, that will happen again. So the essence is there probably will be some form of a repeat version of this. So the point being is that the guilt, which is a better way of saying, is your body's way of saying deep down, I should have done something differently.
Mm-hmm.
And for most people, it's start doing something, because many people have just tried to just remove if I remove everything that's bad, I can't do anything bad. Well, that's not really how life is. If you sit around and be indifferent to stuff that's not acceptable, you're inherently being complicit with it. So, I'm not saying you go out and become an activist for every political thing you don't agree with. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I'm saying is if you see something and you're letting it slide, particularly with someone that you're teaching, you're essentially saying it's okay and you should do that. So that there is a massive call for when you see something wrong to stand up to it in some capacity. Now, obviously, we all have different capacities based upon our stage of life and where we're at. I give the example of you can get a lot more accomplished if you are the president than as I can as just a random guy on the street. I can do things because that's just the spot where I'm at. Now, does that mean that I am useless and can't do anything here? No, not at all. It's actually the opposite. I believe that virtually every big picture problem gets solved with the individual, and then the individual will spread it and become, more aware. And then the problem itself normally goes away. That's something that politicians really try to avoid, that fact. But normally problems go away because the populace themselves fix it, not because something came from Washington. Mm-hmm. And that is really kind of the way that life is, if you look at it. And it starts with yourself and the most basic relationships you have in your life. Who do you spend the most time with, and how do you make them better? So if you sit there and think about, we're growing apart from somewhere, because that can happen. You don't spend time with a relationship, it inherently can fade. What can we do to restore this? Simple thing for anyone out there listening, just call. Don't text them, but actually call someone that you're having that thought with. Like, oh, I haven't talked to whoever and actually had a real conversation with them in a while. Think of the person who you'd want to be closest to, whoever that is in an ideal world. Who would you be absolute closest to? And, by the end of the day, give them a call, even if it's completely out of the blue and surprise and you don't know how it's going to go. It might be scary. It might be, I haven't talked to my son in, 3 years and, there's some rift there. It doesn't matter. Just do it. And life has a way of working these things out when you push the first step. Because typically people are so afraid to do the first step for lots of reasons. But whatever that fear is, I can tell you, once you do it, you're better off for it. And you'll be in a better situation at the end of the day. So I guess that's something I would say to anyone who's listening to this. By the end of the day today, call whoever you would ideally want to have a stronger relationship with than you do right now.
And that takes some effort. It takes some effort to maintain relationships. And like you say, it can be scary. And we fall into default mode of the path of least resistance, where we say, oh, well, I texted even. And that is a form of communication where you're saying, well, let's have some face-to-face, or at least sounded ear kind of thing with a phone call, and let's work on creating and maintaining the relationships with the people that matter, because that is what really brings us satisfaction. And it brings that sense of community and fulfillment that a lot of people we talk about, at the beginning, we can talk about money, and money is wonderful and it is good, but it is not fulfilling like a relationship. Not that we can't have both, but that it is our connections to other people that are meaningful and real, that really make us feel good and alive. And that is, I think, as we're discussing, part of the reason why you're saying our faith matters. Our faith, our connections with people, our connections with God, these are the things that are going to make us feel good and help us to be able to navigate whatever real life situation we're in. So is there anything else you want to make sure that we cover before we close today?
Well, like I said, the one thing we always try to do is make it practical. And I think that that's one of the things we definitely accomplished today, was discussing about how this actually practically steps into it. Because, the criticism that we've had in the past is, well, regardless how you cut it, Jesus was here 2,000 years ago. Why does trying to have a relationship with him now actually matters to me today? And I think that's what we kind of outlined here today, was having a centering thought in a prayer life does develop this. All of these stemming fears is not wanting to be in that place of guilt that's inside of us. But really the best and maybe even the only way that I was able to overcome that was realizing that, that there's a faith here, and diving in and reading the teachings about why the faith says what it says. Just flat out, I read the Gospel of Luke, just picked it because it was 1 in 4, and that was the one we picked. You see people, especially if you're reading it like, I just want to get through this, like I'm forced to do it, you won't get anything out of it. But if you're reading it like you actually want to relate to the characters in it, like you would with a very well-written movie or something, you'll get so much more out of it, especially if you stop and think some backstory into it. You can pick, there's all kinds of different examples in all of them, but it'll relate to you. Am I worse off than the person who's being literally ostracized from the village and being forced to shout that I'm unclean? Probably not. And that person didn't do anything to deserve it either. But what's going on? And you can just think about different examples there. So, and that really all stems from a desire, as you said. You have to do some steps yourself. But really, once you get going down the road of living that way, it doesn't become nearly as hard as it looks like at the start. It's one of these things that when you look back at it, it's like that looked like it was going to be a lot, but it really wasn't. It was really fairly easy. Almost like the fear you have at the top of a very high water slide. Like it looks like it's going to be, you're going to die if you go down this thing. But in reality, it actually was really good. And when you look back and you go, it wasn't that bad. I'm very glad I went through that. And that's essentially what paying dedication to a faithful life and a prayer life will really put you in.
That is wonderful. And as we talked earlier about that feeling of guilt and those bad feelings, and you mentioned through reading the scriptures, and I am a Christian, and I believe that it is through our relationship with Christ, that is the way to let go of those bad feelings, by giving them to Him so that we can feel good. And it's not that I am bad, and it's not even that I feel bad, it's I feel great. And I think that is my desire and my goal with my relationship with Christ, is joy, living joy.
Yeah, and that's really what it ultimately becomes. I mean, you think about it, at the end of the day, have you really truly seen a happy alcoholic? That's using modern chemicals to avoid those feelings. Or would you rather essentially confront them and be better off for them? And that's what the faith life gives you.
Absolutely.
The spirituality gives you.
Oh, well, thank you for visiting with me today, Joe.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome. In closing, I'd like to share a quote by Joyce Meyer. She said, "It's important to have a relationship with God. He's the only one that can get down inside of you and heal what needs to be healed inside. Today, I invite you to return to a place of faith in your life so that you can heal deep down inside. See you next time on Linda's Corner. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of Linda's Corner, please share and subscribe to help us reach new listeners. I also invite you to check out my nonprofit, Hope for Healing, at the website hopeforhealingfoundation.org for free ebooks and other free resources to help increase happiness, build confidence and self-esteem, strengthen relationships, manage stress, and calm feelings of depression and anxiety. I also invite you to grab a copy of one of my books, like Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, or Amazon bestseller, You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. See you next time on Linda's Corner.